Welcome to another edition of Around the Table with Stacy Smith as we take a look at the economy and investing. 2 full months into this year, the stock markets are still on the positive side of things. The NASDAQ, which suffered the largest percentage loss of all the major indices, is now up for the year with a gain of more than 11%. The S&P 500 is up around 5%. The Dow is up only a little less than 1% at this moment. However, when you take a look at where the indices stand from their all-time highs, all of the indices are still down. And that is reflected in how much the average 401k lost last year. According to Fidelity Investments, the average of 401k lost 20% of its value. And the more you had in a 401k, that 20% was quite significant. In fact, the number of 401k accounts with $1 million dropped by a third. In other words, 30% of people who had $1 million saved for retirement no longer had $1 million. So that sets the table for our discussion today. And I'd like to introduce you to our Around the Table analysts and advisors, and they are Carrie Coghill. Carrie is the president and CEO of Coghill Investment Strategies, which is headquartered here in Pittsburgh. She is recognized as one of the nation's leading voices on financial advising. Also with a seat at the table is Frank Rossetti. Frank has been advising clients for 50 years. Frank helped to establish Harvest Financial, where he is the executive chairman. Across the table, we find Kim Forrest. Kim is the Chief Investment Officer and founder of Boca Capital Partners. Kim has a dual background in both finance and in software engineering, and you may have seen Kim in her many appearances on CNBC, Fox Business, and also on Bloomberg. And as we go around the table, we find a name familiar to a lot of Pittsburghers, and it's Bob Fergasso. Bob has been in the investment advisory business for 50 years and is the chairman and chief executive officer of Fergasso Financial Advisors. Bob, by the way, is also listed each year among the Barron's National Top 100 Independent Advisors. I want to thank all of you for joining us once again for Around the Table with Stacy Smith. So if you don't mind, let's go back to that 401k issue for just a moment. A lot of people who put money away for retirement use a vehicle known as target date funds. So Bob, what is a target date fund, and is it a good idea?
A target date fund is a fund that is put together to reflect the age of the participant. That's put together it's allocated by the provider of the retirement plan package. So if a younger worker takes a target date fund geared to his or her age, they're going to have a much higher allocation to growth investments. Conversely, an older, closer to retirement person will have much more in bonds. It can be a really good way to have participation professionally chosen. It has some pitfalls. The one is it may not be right for you. So, for example, as a younger worker, that was meant as a joke. I just want to see if you're listening to me. As someone who might be perceived as closer to retirement, a target date fund would give me a much higher incidence of bonds, which I don't want because I'm not investing for me. I'm investing for the next generation. So I would lose my ability to personalize. Another piece that might be bad about a target date fund is that a bond is not a bond is not a bond, for example. So the selection of the bonds to be used in that target date fund by the provider may have a duration, that is, the bonds may be longer in maturity than I want to accept, and I might take more risk. Or conversely, on the growth side, they may make selections that are not what I would like to make. So in sum, target date fund is good for a lot of people, but not good for those who need to personalize their investments to their situation.
Yeah, I would echo what Bob's saying, that if you're a person that has no interest in investing, you really don't even check your 401k statements. Not that I would recommend that, but there are a lot of people out there that really don't pay attention. So when we look at their risk tolerance, we know that if they're in a target date fund that's highly allocated to growth, if the market goes down, they're less inclined to sell at the wrong time because they don't really even view it as their money, unfortunately. So in that case, a target date fund could be a good alternative, potentially. But as Bob said, you're really locking yourself in, and the risk of owning a target date fund, if you are a risk averse investor, is that you go through a year like we had last year, you open your 401k statement, it's not $1 million anymore, it's 650,000, and you sell at the bottom. So, it is a little tricky from that perspective.
Target date funds are often used in 401ks as the default investment for new participants. And I'm not sure that's a bad idea because it gives a broad diversification. Might be a little expensive, but nonetheless, it's a broad diversification for that person who's just beginning. And while they're in the early stages of accumulation, I don't see anything wrong with that. I do, however, believe that once a reasonable amount of money has been accumulated in the 401k, probably ought to start paying a little more attention and trying to maybe tailor it a little more to yourself. And you can change your investments at that point in time to other things that most 401ks will offer you.
And you can seek individualized guidance for your 401k on your own. You don't have to do it on your own if you don't feel capable of doing it.
And I'm going to say that they're a terrible idea. Target date funds are just terrible. One size fits all generally doesn't work out in life. And this is your money. And here's the thing, the people that are listening to us right now or watching us right now, you're already interested in investing. So you know that one size fits all doesn't work for you over the long haul. So I'm going to make the contra argument that you should never pick this. You need to do homework. You need to either reach out to people that you know that do investing, or, ask a professional. That's what we do. We spend all our time thinking about this. So target date funds, just walk away. Do your homework.
So I'm going to
Maybe
push back.
a little bit too dogmatic. Go ahead.
I'm going to
Terry.
push back on this. And I agree with everything you're saying, but people are people. And if this is a situation where you're so paralyzed and you decide, I'm just going to put in cash versus a target date, where would you land on that?
I wouldn't allow them to do this either or. That's the thing. This is your money. This is important. This is one of those things that I don't think you should be paralyzed. You can always change your mind over time, but you have to do a modicum, a bit of homework. And really, in my life, anytime that I've found myself going along with the status quo and saying, well, it'll be okay, it never, ever is. And that's just my overthinking sort of way to live. So I understand my way of living is not for everyone, and I do see what you're saying. But in this case, you need to do homework. You just do.
We are going to go over our time limit here on this particular segment, but I do have a question, and one of you perhaps can answer it. If you are investing in a 401k and you make your monthly or weekly contribution, whatever it happens to be, from your pay, then when you're in one of these target date funds, you're not necessarily owning those pieces of stock that I mean, are you buying the stock at that price the day you go in, or is it a fund that has?
You're not buying stock. You're not buying individual investments in any 401k. Let me take that back. There are some that allow for individual investments, but the typical 401k is made up of what's called sub-accounts. We know that as mutual funds. And so those are fully invested. And when you make a contribution, you're making it in the allocation you've chosen in each of those funds. If it's a target date fund, your allocations all within one fund, but you're making a total mutual fund investment every time.
And when you do that, you're buying at the price of what that fund happens to be that particular day.
Yes.
That's correct.
And when you sell, it's the same thing is true. And that's a good thing because you're guaranteed a listed price.
Okay, great. We do have to move on. We'll be back in just a moment.